Hello, I'm Callum, founder of BBND, so that's the Broker and Binder Network, and we'll tell you what that means in a wee second for sure. We actually finished the cohort, the Antler cohort, at the end of April when we joined the portfolio. So we've actually gone through a very interesting phase of building prior to Antler and then coming in and using Claude throughout, and I think we'll talk about that tonight for sure, right? But we'll give you a little bit of a background on the company. I'll talk about what I did as a solo founder and then the Antler cohort as well. And then I'll pass over to Alex, who's the CTO and now a co-founder as well, and he'll really talk you through how we're going from MVP to V1 and to the market properly with our tool. So, Broker and Binder Network, what is that, right? So, does anyone work in insurance? Or adjacent to insurance? Hey, nah, one guy. Fantastic. No, so we'll go into this. Look, very simply, intermediated insurance is a part of insurance that you probably have not thought about, but it's where we have a broker that sells a policy, an MGA, which is an underwriting agency, a specialist underwriting company. They transact with the broker, and they do that on behalf of a carrier or insurance company. And it looks like a very simple flow. So the broker sells, they send money and data through to the MGA, and the MGA sends money and reporting and data through to the carrier. But the reality is that this is actually quite tough because the MGA works with hundreds, if not thousands of brokers, and works with maybe 10 or so carriers as well. And there's a different process for every relationship here. And this market segment is a $250 billion segment globally. It's grown from 90 billion. Here in Australia, it's 2 to 12 billion. We had 50 MGAs about 10 years ago. Now we have 300, going up to 350. So huge scale in the market, but their operations haven't scaled with them as well. And so the reality is that all this data and this money flows via Excel, via PDFs, via bank transfers, pretty old school, pretty 90s. And what that leads to is 2 to 3 days a week, phoning brokers, asking for payments, reconciling, and that also leads to a monetary cost. About 250K per MGA. That's an accountant offshore to do some reconciliation. It's software. It's also the time cost and very tangible issues there with the quality of the data going through and the timeliness as well. And so what we do is, or our initial idea really was to be this kind of coordination layer that ingests this data and the payment data and the emails and the PDFs, normalizes it all to a kind of unified language across the organizations, across the systems that the organizations use, does the payments matching and does the reporting. And the reality is that would look like a pretty simple flow, but the whole kind of chain all the way up is really kind of across 6 or 7 types of organizations, 3 at least systems per organization, and we sit across all of these as well. And we do that in a few ways, right? So we have our protocol that's really around how and the data flow and how we set up the data and how we communicate that across, but we also have our AI product as well, so that's yes, the agents that can do a lot of these workflows on behalf, or the deployment of the organization's own agents into our platform as well. And we actually then have 4 products that we take to market. So reconciliation one, a reporting one, DA, so that's the oversight, because it's very important to have the oversight on the flow of money from that end, and then payments, which is our real kind of go-to long-term play. That's yes, cash management and accounting, very important, but also plugging into that payment infrastructure and doing that too. So that's very briefly what we're doing. We're a policy accounting system for a very boring part of insurance, but it's a high value area and it's ripe for a bit of change as well. So the story on how we got there. So I worked in insurance for quite a long time in Zurich, in Switzerland, in fact, for one of the world's largest reinsurers. I also, had a computer science background and did AI back in 2017-18, before it was really kind of a cool subject, and it was just kind of maths and stats, and the only kind of LLM we were talking about wasn't even a thing. GPT-2 was a small subsection of a not very interesting course in that whole degree, to be honest, text-based information retrieval. And so I've been working in insurance for a long time. I saw this challenge, and I started coding line by line. So I kind of had a view on what we wanted to do. It was out there, digging up the programming books again, getting back on the tools after a wee while of doing client stuff and data science and not real kind of shipping code. And this was kind of like mid-tail end 24, and things started to get really exciting, right? So, not the Claude guys at this time, but Gemini and GPT started to come, not programming line by line so much, but starting to think more about leveraging the LLMs as for testing maybe, or for debugging. I think anyone that's been doing it for a year or so will have seen that kind of change before we just kind of outsourced everything completely. And that was a pretty exciting time because you're still programming, but you've got a big helper there as well. Now, what was really interesting was just that over the last 6-7 months, the scope of what you were giving through to the LLM started to change, right? So it's not just one little function, maybe it's really thinking about a whole architecture, a whole schema at one time. And that was really how we were programming until we started Antler, which, for anyone that's not done it, if you're a founder, great process, right? 10 hard weeks where you've got a certain number of things to do. Such as with the cohort, really coming in with an idea, looking for a co-founder, and working through to the investment committee. And Claude, really changed how I was, and then we were able to work towards that. So number one, Claude Code really kicking off tail end Jan and Feb. I put our whole system into it, and full review across security was the first thing, but we did. I essentially came up with a real good build plan for the next kind of 3-4 weeks as we were looking to deliver on our first pilot plan, and then secure more and the MVP as well. So that was actually a real big change. But so number one, the cohort, right? So this is 10 hard weeks where you're trying to do many things, right? So you're trying to deliver for the investment committee, and you're trying to go through this period of master classes, all this kind of thing. It takes a lot of time, Number two, the validation and going out to the market and really, talking to clients to get a view of whether the problem exists or the solution exists. And this was really the first time I was starting to use the LLM for anything other than a bit of coding, right? Because we're going out, we're talking, we've got lots of meeting notes, we've got recorded conversations, we've got this trying to link up and think about it more holistically as well, and I'll go through how we do that in a second. The third thing that we were trying to do was deliver on the pilots, or try and gain new pilots and LOIs, right? So having an MVP, something really tangible to go out and show, I think it was super powerful to have not just a kind of Figma or a wireframe, but yes, of course, we've been building for a long time, but the amount of change that we could do in that kind of first couple of weeks was phenomenal as well. And then, of course, the fourth thing we had going was Claude Code. Like essentially a junior developer, maybe even a little bit more, working alongside whilst I was doing these other three things, so you could offload a lot of work, right? And what was taking, let's say, a full weekend before was now taking an hour, right? And you could really start to deliver over those 10 weeks. And so that's where we end up with how we start to leverage it today. And Alex will go into it on how we're really rolling it out. But number one is on that day-to-day operations, right? So everything from the emails, meeting notes, meeting prep docs, all these things that maybe in corporate you would spend quite a lot of time doing, briefing notes for a meeting, trying to work out what it is you want. Because you've got it plugged into everything, you can do that on the bus on the way in or on the train, and then walk into that meeting very well prepared. You've got the meeting notes. I was always very bad at meeting notes. Now it's very easy if you're on the online meeting and it's recorded, and you can just chuck it in. We have that then feeding into the CRM. And there's a lot of chatting with it. There's a lot of me chatting with it. And we do have some automated jobs, the daily reminder of what emails to send, etc. But that's a real big change for me, I think, versus where I was in corporate a year ago. Number two is Claude in the tool. I think, I don't know, long term, we're kind of deploying our own AI and fine-tuning our own models and training on our own data around very specific problems. But look, for an MVP, having Claude API in there to do things, everything from document ingestion through to like mapping plot schema, all these kind of different things. Very easy to deploy and get into the tool, and great to go in there to a potential pilot plan, to discussion and get that feedback with that. Number three, building the product and the prototype. Claude Code, fantastic. You'll talk to clients, and they'll be used to talking to vendors, and they'll say, oh, look, we want this feature, and then it goes into a roadmap, it goes away. But you, being that nimble founder, can have your MVP, take that, probably come back in a few days with the feature as well. And so that's been fantastic for us. We've got Claude across all three of those, and then we have our CTO Alex, who's now taking it from MVP to B1, and he's going to talk through his kind of process there. So thanks very much.
All right, see if I give you a microphone that works. It's working? Yeah. People hear me all right? Yep. Yeah, sounds good. All right. Hey, I'm Alex, CTO, BBND. It's been a little while since I've had to do something like this, so if you see me run off and get my water bottle, that is going to be fine with us all.
Yeah, it's not picking up. Sorry.
I'm holding this in. Cool, all right. One prompt and a dream. That was pretty much the play. So when I first started playing around with LLMs, the first thing I did was just say, here's my idea, build the whole thing. Varying success on that front. If it was small, it usually did a pretty good job. If it was large, it didn't do it pretty much straight up. Anyone else giving that a crack? I'm going to make you raise your hands with an audience engagement. Sure. Once I tried that, I tried this. It's a classic. Pretty much the same level of success. And then after that, I kind of swapped over to a version that looked a little bit more like this, where I had a lot better results when I got Claude to kind of ask me questions about what we were building. And all of a sudden, it became very clear that I hadn't really scoped out anything. But that's okay. We work together and we start to solve those things. So the goal for this session is I'm going to explore, I'm going to use some Claude Code skills, some plugins that I like. We're going to talk about how you need to fill the role of the system architect so that we can automate our grunt work, which will be our actual coding. And then at the very end of all these steps, we should be reviewing our code, but we kind of started automating some of that review step prior, so that by the time it was for me to review, at least then I was at least half confident that it was going to be alright. Little context on context windows. For anyone who doesn't know what a context window is or isn't really up to date, here's a very quick overview. Claude.md is a file that automatically gets loaded into your context window. Your context window is just everything that your LLM or your Claude kind of knows about you. It's kind of basing a lot of its answers off what is in the context window. So you fill it up with a bunch of shit, you're going to kind of get that back. And then there's this kind of concept, which is sometimes commonly called the dumb zone, which is when you start to fill up your context windows, somewhere around 50% it really starts to decline. So some of the actions that we'll be taking in the demo that's coming up, it's pretty much going to be around kind of limiting what's in our context windows, things like that. Cool. Anyone who's been doing this for a little while probably has some familiarity with the research plan implement idea. I think if you have a bit of a play with it, you'll kind of explore it, you'll kind of figure out on your own how you want this to work. But what we're doing today, and this is a pretty similar overview to how I was running our kind of V1 port. So Callum had bytecoded our kind of pilot, and was designed ultimately to be functional, and we were constructing features as fast as we could. When we kind of knew that we have some scale in our future, I've gone off and redesigned some architecture on GCP, and then I pretty much told it to just port the entire front end. I tried to do it in one prompt. When I kind of asked it to ask me questions about it, I spent a whole week responding to it before we kind of moved out of the research phase and into the plan phase. Maybe another day in planning, and then after that, I kind of was able to just let it run for the most part. It wrote its own tests, it kind of did its own little reviews along the way. I'm happy to report that by the time we got to the end of it, everything was working pretty well. All right, so it's easily said, but how are we going to do it? So these are the two skills that I was using. So there's this drill me skill, some of you may have heard of. I'm using that as my research. And then I've got this write PID skill, which I'm using as my client. So the real me skill is one that's kind of lifted from tech social media. There's a guy named Matt Pocock, YouTuber. He's definitely worth a watch. He kind of has a bunch of good beginner to intermediate tier videos, but he has this skill, and it basically just says, ask me tons of questions, and then ask me more questions, and then only stop once we're 100% sure that we're kind of happy that we know what we're doing. And then, cool, I've just recorded my screen. I'm using VS Code, I'm using the Claude Code plugin, just some basic setup. And this is pretty much what we're going to be building today. Yeah, cool. Hey, came back. Pretty much what we're going to be building today. I'm not going to bore you with the insurance build, that took a really long time. This was a university project I did like a decade ago, and now it is much, much easier than it was back then. So yeah, if you don't know, 16 buttons, when you press them, they make noise. All right, there you go. This is very exciting. You watch me type. I knew that I was being recorded, so I was really trying not to make any mistakes. So I did it straight away, obviously, and then it's very boring. You realize how slow you kind of type, so we're kind of speak through some of that.
Okay. Yeah, just got a message from the market. Like 6 or 8 people were downstairs.
But the general gist of it is I'm telling it, we're building this thing over here. I've got the image in my source files, the guide, I've got some sound files that already exist.
Awesome, thank you so much. Right, let's talk tomorrow.
I told it that I want it to look cool. I think that's a very important part, a very prompt. If you're not doing that, that's a good skill. And then, yeah, very cool demo, just in case you guys didn't know. And then, more importantly, at the end of this, I'm asking it to kind of put together a brainstorm.md. And that's basically it's going to be the brain dump of what kind of comes out of this session.
Hi, good to see you, man.
You pretty much straight away said, hey, we've got some questions for you. You said this, what did you mean by that? So here, for example, it's asking us, how are we going to build our stack? Pretty much every step of the way through this. For this demo, I've just accepted the recommended option. So we're going plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and nothing fancy. There you go, so you improved it this time.
Yes.
Ina
Ina knows as well, but
really
we can start moving it out.
You start with the prompt, it's actually going to
they actually call it
So it's asking, where exactly do you want the buttons? It's figuring out, hey, what exactly do you want the labels? Are we making our own colors, or are we using these other colors that are already there? Questions keep on coming. How are we animating it? What happens if I press it 8 times? What happens if I hold it down? What happens if I click it with my mouse? How do we want it to look? I said cool, but what does it actually mean? It's a dark synthwave neon. I agree with it. And then what font are we using? Orbitron's cool font. I've never heard of it before, but whatever Claude says, Claude gets. Yeah, we mean logo and title. Cool, layout. I told it to swear everything into the root directory, nothing fancy out here today. We want to add some hints. Now it's kind of giving a guide. It's kind of going to the top here, I thought. But I agree. Put it on, put the full thing on, put it in the bottom. Cool, and we're back to video. All right. So this is pretty much where it's decided that it's asked enough questions and it's reasonably happy with what we've got. So it's putting together this brainstorm markdown file. We'll kind of roll through it very quickly. I don't control this, so how fast I went through it when I recorded this. But the idea is that everything that we've spoken about, so pretty much everything that we discussed now is kind of been dropped into this file. It gives you an opportunity to kind of go back and have a read and just see if you actually liked what went in there, like make sure it hasn't done anything particularly strange along the way. If there's anything in there that you think, hey, I'd really like to change that now, now is a great time to do that. Yes. Cool. And then pretty much this brainstorm MD is effectively going to be our context as we move on to the next piece. Cool. This write PID skill, I didn't steal it from any YouTubers. This one, I just got Claude to do it straight off the bat. I said I need it, and it said, no problem, buddy. Tell me where to put it, and I put it there. And then that's pretty much the end of that story. Cool. So straight up, write PID. I've done it in the same window as I did last time. If you're doing this larger, you probably want to start a new context and just point it directly at that file. That way you kind of prevent your context from flooding up and keep it in smart zone. Cool, let's generate a new doc. This one's much bigger. I didn't read this one very much, but it's basically just more stuff, more technical. And that basically is going to be the blueprint for what we end up building. Cool, plugins. These are my two favorite when I first started. One was Superpowers, one was Taskmaster. If you haven't heard of them or if you don't know where to find plugins, I just asked for it. And these are the ones that it told me were good. So Superpowers gives you a bunch of skills. It kind of gives you all the skills you need to kind of go through that research, plan, and implement. Taskmaster is actually my favorite. It takes a large task and breaks it down into smaller bites. And then you can kind of break those bites down into smaller bites as well, and then yeah, just keeps cascading down. Cool. If you want to know how you install plugins, just tell Claude to do it. Yeah. Pretty easy. Yeah, I did it. Cool. Taskmaster, a couple of useful commands in case you're going to go off and do this yourself. The pass PID option basically takes your PID, it's going to convert it into these bite-sized tasks. After that, you can run this analyze complexity, so it basically is just figuring out which tasks are too big to be a task. You run expand all, it breaks it down into subtasks. If you think your subtasks are too big, you can run analyze complexity again, and expand all again. And you can just keep doing that until you're happy. You can use Taskmaster Next, Taskmaster Start, to kind of get things moving. Though in this demo, we're going to be using Taskmaster Loop. That was kind of the whole point of this, was that once I told it to start building, I didn't want it to stop, and I didn't want it to talk to me. Superpowers, useful commands, brainstorming and writing plans are very, very similar to the two skills that I showed in the beginning. But even making your own skills is cool. Using skills that you don't know how to work is cool too, but different strokes. Yep. So Taskmaster installed as an MCP, so it's great. I didn't have to slash command anything. I just say Taskmaster did work, telling it to find out PID. And then it actually works quite well. I think that says 10 times in the thing over. This is actually about 20 times. This is the step that will probably start to chew through a bunch of your credits. Should make it go faster. Cool. Very exciting stuff. Oh, we got 10 tasks. Alright. I'm not sure if I saw videos or not. My screen just shows like, no, I did not. Cool. So the 10 tasks was made. You can see them there. They put numbers in brackets, and they're basically saying this step is dependent on the previous step. That's really cool, because it basically means that nothing kind of runs at a time. Nothing starts too early, nothing finishes too late. And yeah, I'm using Taskmaster Loop, and I'm leveraging Superpowers here. I basically said use the test-driven development command. So that's quite useful. It's going to build some test cases as it's building each feature. After I recorded this video, I actually know the demo was kind of lagging when I pressed buttons. So I asked it to change that and make it better. And then a bunch of my tests immediately broke, which is great because Claude saw that, Claude fixed it all for me, and that's kind of the benefit of doing that test-driven development style. Here it's asked me, how do you want to test it? I picked the default option naturally. So here it's on a loop. You can see here it's made some tests, it's written the code, it's confirming that the tests all worked, and saying, cool, that's the first step done. Pretty sure we just churn and burn here for another second task, third task gets done, fourth task gets done. Sweet, halfway point, love it. Pretty sure we'll fast forward that again pretty soon. This whole thing took about 15 minutes on the whole, so. And yeah, the only thing worse than watching D type is watching flow type. Cool. Here's pretty happy. It's running some tests, the final tests, and it's doing some local smokes. It's stoked. And there it is. Very cool demo. I don't know if I have sound on this, but I will try to bring that up in a sec. We'll see if it worked. Another plugin that I think is very useful if you're building web apps or anything like that. Playwright is cool, and there are a bunch of different versions of it. There's other ones called Agent Browser. The whole point of this is that you're giving Claude access to the browser. So if you're building an app on the web, tell Claude to test it before you test it. So you can go in, you can press the buttons, you can type into the fields, you can figure out if there's bugs in your code before you have to look at it. It's a really good thing to kind of put in your review cycle. Cool. All right, that's me. I'm Alex. That was Callum. Thank you, everybody. If you want to contact me, there it is. And then let me see if I've got sound or not. We can try this demo out real quick. Oh, I've lost it. I think it might be the one. All right, what is gold then? If anyone wants to see it, you just find me later. I'll show it to you on my own laptop.
So there's a question on Claudians for Alex. For building grade products or existing project in production, how are you using Claude Code? Any workflows, skills, tips, tricks? What's your end-to-end process, if you have any one that's in production?
Yeah, I mean, that workflow that I showed there is a very simple overview of how to work. I think the biggest piece for us and how it would differ to how we're currently doing it is how much we kind of have in that review step that's just automatically done. We really kind of want to get this to the point that it's completely hands-off, but we do have some reliability, or at least that we can expect that we're kind of getting good results out of it. So we've got a lot of stuff when we develop where we try and force it into good frameworks. Read a couple of software engineering books and I tried to force it to kind of follow everything that I've learned. And we've had pretty good results currently. We're still not at a point I think you can get away with not looking at the code. We're probably not 12 months away from that, but something to look forward to. But for now, yeah, let Claude do as much of the review of its own code before it gives it to you, and then yeah, hopefully your job is just a little bit simpler.
Yeah, and from my experience regarding like legacy or brownfield projects that you get Claude on, or any of the other AI agents, the important thing is that you let Claude analyze the code base to some extent, and like go and like spend some tokens on, hey, can you go and analyze the code base, create essentially an architecture overview or like an architecture document. What layers do we have? Do we have like a API and then a service layer and then a database layer, so that Claude has an overview, and then that helps yourself, but also in the next iterations when changes need to be done, you can then tell Claude, hey, look at this document, this is explaining how things work, and therefore when we build a new API endpoint, don't just randomly put everything into the database access straight into the API endpoint, but go through the service layer, things like that.